Iran stuff. Oppenheimer, the movie. I saw it last night, and for being almost 3 hours long, or was 3 hours long, it was well put together. I don't think there was any scene in it that wasn't necessary. I know there has been some controversy over reading Sanskrit, and I have become deaf during a sex scene, and some people objected to that, but I guess it didn't have to be that way, but nonetheless. Anyway, I've known about the history of the Manhattan Project, and even before that, with Niels Bohr and Heisenberg, and the Chicago first sustained chain reaction. I knew about all those things, and the massive effort, and the colonel, actually the general, there was been several movies about this, and I knew about what went on, and actually I found the movie to be kind of skimpy in a way, because there was a lot more in it than even what's shown there. They focused on Oppenheimer and the science and the political security issues that came about, and the big already perceived communist threat, and we didn't want to share anything with the communists and spies and all that stuff. But I knew the basic story. I don't think they told me anything I did not know. To concentrate on Oppenheimer, and after the fact, I mean, he did realize it before it was all done, before the first Trinity test, that this was going to change things. And objection to the hydrogen bomb was real, because he thought it would start an arms race, and guess what? It did. And I don't know. The core of the issue of the thing, for me anyway, was, science advanced and the knowledge advanced, and all of a sudden they realized, well, they could unleash the power in atoms, special ones, uranium, but they could unleash that, and it would be a horrendous amount of energy released very quickly, i.e. a bomb like never been seen before. And I wrote a story one time that I was an engineer in Nazi Germany. I was not in the army, I was an engineer, and I was working for some company, and they got the call that they needed to upgrade their gassing systems at several of their concentration camps or labor camps, and I was sent over to do it. And to me, it was a challenge, a problem, a technical problem, without any sort of, it had no humanity component to it. Should I do this? I didn't have any choice in the matter. In fact, it was, if I didn't do it, somebody else was going to do it, that kind of rationale. And, it's a confession that the science holds power beyond any thoughts of, well, what is going to be the consequences of this thing. And I think Oppenheimer, it was a big surprise. I think when he began to understand I mean, he was a scientific challenge. That's all it was. And could they do it? Could they do it? Could they do it? And after the Trinity test, everybody was congratulating everybody else that they had done the impossible. This had never been done before. The science was new. The calculations, of course, all had to be done by hand. And the group of scientists there had done this in a relatively short time, given the science and understanding at the time, and the materials and the need to refine uranium and so on and so on and so on. And they were all congratulating themselves. And they didn't have, for them it was a challenge. And that's what it was, a scientific challenge without a whole lot of, there were some who had serious questions about what they were doing and the implications that it may have. They didn't portray Truman very well. I left about 15 minutes early. The story had been told. I knew the story. This was going to concentrate on the whole security clearance with Oppenheimer, and I wasn't all that bothered about that. I knew how even that turned out, so I left 15 minutes early. But there was one of the scenes in the last half hour where Oppenheimer is invited into the White House to meet with Truman, President Truman. And he expresses his concern over the hydrogen bomb development and a potential arms race and so on and so on. And also that this weapon on Hiroshima and Nagasaki killed a lot of innocent people. And Truman basically called him a crybaby. Don't let that crybaby come back here. And didn't portray him very well. If I come from an engineering science background, I don't come from a political background, and they have to make really hard choices, and I understand that, and I've been through it over and over again. I still think it would have been a good idea to somehow, through a third party, and invite the Japanese out to some island or someplace, maybe even in their chain, I don't know, some remote island, and blow it up completely and show them what we got. And maybe it wouldn't have been required. Now the controversy about this, they were so regimentized and militarized that they were going to fight to the death. They had already done that on a lot of the islands, and it had been a slaughter on both sides. So the rationale was that yes, we'll drop a bomb, and that will be enough to convince them that we have overwhelming power to totally genocide. It is interesting. I always thought it was interesting. It took two. Now, I don't know exactly, and I've never researched it hard, if the standing order from Truman was, you're going to drop two. Don't care what happens in between. I mean, if they, after the first bomb, if they signaled, surrender, 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 then no, we don't drop the second bomb. Or even if there was, well, we might, gonna drop it anyway. I don't know what happened during that time period. If both were from the get-go intended to be dropped, no matter what the Japanese said after the first one. I suspect that the second one required a separate call. I don't know. Truman had to approve the second one. And the targets, of course, had military. The basis of those cities was military. There were military production facilities in both cities, and there were some cities ruled out because of their cultural history. We weren't going to destroy centuries-old cultural Japanese history. So there was some consideration. It's a strange sort of parameters you use and something like that. I was involved in a SDI for a little while, which was going to be this orbiting platform of missile defense missiles in space to shoot down incoming nuclear weapons. But they're also, if you think about it, they were a bunch of nuclear weapons set up in space that could be targeted anywhere and everywhere. But you have this defense system, and now you have to make, there's only so many of them up there, and they're with multiple re-entry vehicles, MIRVs. One Russian or Chinese or North Korean missile could launch 6, 10, 12, I think the max is around 12 independently targeted nuclear weapons. Not huge ones, but enough that it would make a mess. So you had to figure out some sort of priority. Which cities do you protect first? Now, that's a, is Chicago more valuable or important to everything than Tucson, Arizona, or Miami, Florida versus Atlanta, Georgia? I don't have an idea if they ever even got that far on trying to figure out how you work a priority, but somebody somewhere probably did think about it, and that's just, I had a dream, and I think it was a dream, but I was in some high-level military setting. It was a dinner party, and all the generals had their dress blue or dress whatever they are on, and they were all standing around talking to each other. I have no idea while I was there. It was not out of reason that I couldn't have been there, because I was doing military stuff, and some of it was, up in those ranks, Joint Chiefs of Staff and stuff like that. But anyway, I was there, and I heard a conversation among three of the generals, and I know I've repeated this more than once to a lot of people, and I'm going to repeat it again, was one general said to the other, the only real problem with the nuclear war is body disposal. The only real problem with nuclear war is body disposal. How do we bury all the bodies fast enough that we don't have diseases and areas that cannot be used? And it shocked me. It terribly shocked me, because underneath of that statement was some kind of acceptance that nuclear war was on the table. It could be. And it didn't. That was a total shock. You have to be totally insane to launch. There was a piece in Oppenheimer that I did not know about, which I did enjoy. There was a pilot who explained that on a bombing run, he coming back to England, he had seen a V2 fly by on its way to London. And it had occurred to him the nightmare of the V2 carrying a nuclear weapon. And he was afraid when missiles were such, i.e. intercontinental ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missile, with nukes on it. You're already seeing the future. That's where the science is going to take us. That's where the engineering is going to take us. A lot of brilliant minds are going to be focused on that. And underneath of it all, we don't have any choice, right? If the Soviets build it, we got to have it. If the Chinese build it, we have to have it. If the North Koreans, Pakistan, India, France, Germany, I don't know, Germany, I'm not sure if they have them or not. I don't think so. We may have them stationed there underneath of our control or NATO's control, but nonetheless, the whole thing with nuclear weapons, and again, the Manhattan Project was the first one. There was some sort of, and I never understood that, and I wasn't unaware of it, that there had been radiation detected off of some, uh, I thought it was a Japanese island, or no, it supposedly was Russian. The Russian had tested some sort of nuclear device. That was what the intelligence had said. I don't know. I never heard that one. I'm not aware that the Soviets had done any kind of nuclear testing till after the Manhattan Project and the famous couple who were in fact executed for spying, who supposedly gave a lot of good intelligence to the Soviets about how to construct a nuclear weapon. Even if you tell somebody how to do it, there's a whole lot to doing it. That's why I still have problems with the North Koreans manage to make their own nuclear weapons with outside help. The technology and the engineering required is significant. It is not an easy issue, and I was told more than once the chemical warfare is much more likely because it's relatively cheap and it's easy to deliver even by strapping on the people. But anyway, I was not aware that the Soviets had ever done anything. I think their first nuke was in 1949. I think that was the first indication the Soviets had a nuclear weapon. Oppenheimer. Did I feel for the man? Yeah, I mean, he didn't understand. He eventually grokked it out of his science self. And he wasn't doing a whole lot of science during this movie. He was managing, and he understood what progress was when he got reports from various groups, the theoretical and the metallurgy groups, and the testing that was going on. He understood, and but he didn't do calculations himself. I was aware there was a threat of setting the atmosphere on fire. I had read that, and by the time the Trinity test had been really dismissed, they kept harping, and it was a small chance. I know that one, a continuing chain reaction, no. And by now we've set off so many nukes around the world, above ground, below ground, in the air, that we know it can't do it. And a whole lot bigger than what they had at Trinity or even Nagasaki or Hiroshima. And I don't know, I think those were in the 10 kiloton range or there or so, and it's bizarre to be talking about little bombs, isn't it? When, I mean, how much overkill do you need? A 20 kiloton bomb, 100 kiloton bomb, it's asinine and crazy that we would even me would think about such stuff. Oppenheimer, yeah, probably needed somebody of his intelligence to drive the whole thing. He was the glue. He understood enough about all of it so he could assess the progress being made. The progress was made by other very smart people. And I always heard a story that Heisenberg was put in charge of nuclear something in Nazi Germany. But he and Hitler didn't get along very well. And Hitler apparently, even though he funded the V2 project, he didn't provide resources, and it would have taken a lot for a country the size of Germany to actually build a bomb, get enough uranium and refine it and all that sort of stuff. But then I have read from time to time, true or not, that Heisenberg drug his feet. He was not a strong supporter. I'm sure he saw the science. But for whatever reason, and again, I have read it several times, but whether it's true or not, I don't know. He was equivalent of Oppenheimer in Nazi Germany. Now, it is a real scary thought to think that the Nazis would have built a bomb first, and they obviously would have taken out London. And easy, short flight distance, had a delivery vehicle, V2. I don't know if it could carry the weight or not, but it carried a lot of weight. So that would have been a horror, and they would have easily held a stranglehold on most of Europe forever and ever with nuclear weapons. And The Man in the High Castle is a movie that, if you've never seen, is interesting, where they do, and the Japanese do, have nuclear weapons, and they defeat the United States, and they use nuclear weapons as a threat to keep us in order. Had that gone that way, and so again you come back to, well, the scientists, if we don't do it, they will. Knowledge is now there. We think it can be done. We have to do it. I'm sure some people said, no, I'm not going to do it. In the movie, there were various scientists who said, no, I'm not moving out to Los Alamos, and do this for a year or 2 years or 3 years. No, I'm not doing that. I mean, there were people who said no. Oppenheimer, instrumental in the development of it, yeah, from a management point of view and his understanding of results. Father of the atomic bomb, I guess, from one perspective, but there was, I think, 4,000, I don't know how many people were involved in this, but a lot. And a lot of knowledge about a lot of stuff besides nuclear physics was required. Anyway, I liked the movie. It was okay. It moved along quickly. It was, I don't think it's like one of those time monuments that will always be praised and, saluted as a achievement in cinematic history. I don't see it that way. There's somebody's been treated more than once, and but underneath of it all is that core issue. You have the science. Do you do it? Just because you can doesn't mean you have to. But in the world where you have, North Korea or somebody with a very strong will, with the need, the Japanese expansion was they needed more resources. They needed everything because they didn't have it on the Japanese islands. The Germans was a power issue. They just wanted to control everything, and they implement their master race concept and the purification of the world by elimination of Jews. They had an agenda, but when you have people like that and will, then you have to get nasty, and it's a bit. I wish it wasn't so, But anyway, I used to listen to Radio Moscow when I was a teenager. This is during the Cold War, and they had English language broadcasts. I don't think I ever heard a broadcast where the Russian propaganda machine did not make anybody who was listening in any language that they broadcast in that only America had ever used a nuclear weapon. The Americans were touting how the Cold War, the Russians were crazy and they had all these nukes, and they were going to use them, and they were going to, Khrushchev was going to launch a nuclear war, and they were going to put them in Cuba and 90 miles off our coast, and we wouldn't have any warning, and blah, 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 blah. But the Russians said in return, America is only the country who ever used a nuclear weapon twice. And that's true. I think at that point, that turning point, you have to think about it from the rest of the world point of view. When they became aware of that, then who is the gorilla in the room? The United States. And we have been since. Not only do we have nuclear weapons, we have lots and lots and lots of military destructo. Anyway, Oppenheimer, the movie, I liked it. It's worth a view. If you don't know anything about the Manhattan Project, it's a good summary. It doesn't talk much about Oak Ridge, Tennessee and what was involved there. Yeah, I made note to it. And Sanford, I can't remember. There was a nuclear, another place that did nuclear enrichment and so on and so on. And it's still a contaminated, polluted place, which will take 5,000 years to clean up or whatever. Anyway, today is the 15th of September 2023. This is a long one about Oppenheimer and the whole science and humanity, and if just because you can do it, and there are factors and forces that say no matter, you got to do it. Somebody, if you don't, somebody else will. And I don't know. We're here, and we got umpteen thousand nukes. We can destroy the world 5 times over. And I don't know, does that mean something? I don't know. Anyway, Uncle Ron and stuff. This was about Oppenheimer, Manhattan Project, nuclear weapons, scientists, humanity, blah, 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 blah.